Good afternoon, everyone. Okay.
I like talking to you.
Assume your spot. Thank you for being here. I'm Penny. I'm the superintendent of schools, and it's really nice to see a crowd at our community engagement event. Thank you for taking the time. I want to just let you know we do have a school board member with us today. Jennifer Ringgold is here to listen to the conversation, hear your insights. And we have, of course, our whole team here who will be facilitating the session. We're really fortunate to partner with GMB, Clark Construction, and Three Rivers Construction for our facility assessment and planning process. They are facilitating these community engagement sessions and also facilitating our steering team, leading us through this process to maximize community engagement and reach a plan for our future. So thank you. Today is designed for you to both get an update about the status of the steering team, and you'll see that there are several opportunities for you to offer your insights that we can take back to that team. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen. He will introduce himself and the team, and I will be in the back listening and taking some notes.
Thanks, Penny. I'm Stephen Gunther with GMB, working as project manager for our efforts here through this process. My background is mechanical engineering, and I am one of you. Like, I am a community member who lives in Midland, and my kids will go to Midland Public Schools. So yeah, I'll pass it to you.
Hi everyone, I'm Nandita Mishra. I have a background in education. I've taught for about 10 years. I also have a background in architecture, interior design, and educational planning, in connecting the functions of teaching and learning to facilities and spaces within which our children experience teaching and learning on a daily basis. Pass it on to...
Do you want to say your connection to me?
Oh, yes, I should say. I had that yesterday too. So my son and my daughter-in-law recently got married. Actually, they got married in October, and they just moved to Midland. So, you know, I have vested trust because you know what's coming next.
Awesome. Well, hi everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Brady Mills. I'm also at GMB. We work together as a team here. My role is specifically on this community engagement, two-way communication with the communities we work with. So any school district planning that we do, we want to make sure is reflective of its community's priorities. So that's specifically my role here. I'm not the architect, but I'm here to tell the architects what you all are saying. So here we are.
And also, we have...
Oh yes, sorry.
Kenny Levinsky,
Yes.
Senior Project Manager with Clark Construction Company. I graduated from Midland Public Schools and am a current resident of Midland.
Chris Woldrup with Three Rivers Corporation. I am a Midland resident with two children at various ages in Midland Public Schools.
All right. So just as a kind of, last time we were all together in a community engagement session, we touched on this idea of a keystone species, in particular a keystone turtle, and how in the community where the keystone turtles live and thrive, they actually build homes and burrows for other animals in case there's an emergency, like if there's a flood or anything like that. The keystone turtle there is to support all of its neighbors, all of its friends, all of that. Yes, how does that relate to schools? But schools in their community are that keystone species. Schools are there to support the community around them. And without that keystone species, without that school system within the community, what is there to support that broader community as it progresses into the future? So in essence, keystone turtle, little thing, but is very, an idea that is very relatable to schools in general and the purpose of schools within the community, the broader community in which they exist.
So we talked a little bit last time, and if you weren't able to join us last time, we're doing a quick recap now, but please, we'd encourage you to go to the district's website where all of these sessions and the slides and what we went through are shared, so you have visibility into all that. But just a quick review. So our role as we're working with the district right now, we're really seeing this as a tridge, right? So we are working with the school district itself, the administration, along with the Board of Education, and kind of laying the framework for what do we need to look at, how are we analyzing this, how are we looking at our facilities, kind of setting the stage for decisions to be made in the near future. However, to make those decisions, we didn't want to do that in a vacuum at all. We wanted to make sure that we're learning both from the last proposal that was not passed, the community in this process, and then also from the different expertise in the room. So we've assembled, the district has assembled this representative steering team of about 25 to 30 people. This really was intended, very intentionally selected to be a broad base of the community. So there are people on there that have students in the schools, there are teachers on there, there are other staff on there, there are business owners, there are people that have no connection to our schools, there are people from different ends of the district. So the goal of that committee is really to provide a recommendation to the Board of Education that's informed by their different community perspectives, and their directive is to be taking things from our meetings and going out to the community and bringing that back to the steering team, back to the board, back to this administration to make sure that decisions reflect the broader community. And then right here we have the greater Midland community. We cannot do this without you all, so we just really thank you for being here, sincerely. Your feedback is very valuable to this process. And you'll notice even in the setup of this session, what we will share, we'll give you some information today, but none of this is intended to be one way. We're going to need you to weigh in as well on some of these priorities. We've developed some ideas that we have so that we can be forming a plan that does make the most sense for everybody.
So the district and GMB, Clark Construction, and 3 Rivers began the process collectively together in envisioning guiding values, and part of it stemmed from conversations around alignment with the district's strategic plan, strategic goals, and vision, around the portrait of the graduate that has been created for the district. Alongside that, a very comprehensive and detailed facility assessment in investigating all details around each Midland public school facility. And in addition to that, we also went through an extensive educational assessment in which we looked at curriculum, opportunities, and roadblocks with facilities around teaching and learning and student experience. So these values are all encompassing of all these different buckets that were investigated and thought through. These guiding values were developed by the steering committee around CTE and future-ready student experiences, resilience, safety, security, and overall well-being, equity, strategic prioritization, phased responsible facility planning, and transparent stewardship and community clarity. All of these guiding values are kind of the anchors that are going to help make decisions as we continue to move forward in this journey in looking at design priorities that will guide us in shaping what the roadmap looks like for Midland Public Schools.
So let's just take a look at all of these facilities, and we'll talk through a couple of slides here. This is a timeline of all of Midland Public Schools and their current facilities. You can see in 1926 is when Carpenter Pre-Primary Center was built, all the way until Central Park Elementary in 2017. The 9 buildings that reused, all the rest of those educational facilities, all the other elementary schools, both middle schools and both high schools, were built between 1950 and 1970. So this community of Midland rallied around the school districts at that time to build 9 school buildings in 20 years. It's just, about two years they were building a new building, and that had the full community support to do that. And that's just Midland building this. But I want you guys to also think about where, if you didn't go to Midland Public Schools and have that community support at that time, where did you go to high school? Where did you go to school? Whether it was public school or parochial school, someone in your community made the investment in your future. They made the investment in the facilities. They made the investment in your education. They made that investment for you to get where you're at today. And so this is just one example of the Midland community coming together to make that investment for those kids at that time. And yeah, that's 6 years ago, and the community was different at that point, but it still shows a theme of coming together to support one another, centered around schools. And if we go, even a recent example for this community is look at 6 years ago, there was the flood. The community came together to support one another, whether it was your time and your efforts or your financial resources. we all came together to support one another towards this common goal of helping one another. And I think that's so important, this common theme in Midland as a whole. Like, it's a very unique community, but the common theme is always coming together and helping and supporting our neighbors. And that's at the core of everything this community does. I mean, look at Neighboring Week that happens, it's getting bigger and bigger. It's at the core of what this community does, is that, community interaction, communities coming together and supporting each other.
Yeah, so I think part of this is, as we talk about the schools being that keystone turtle as a big part of this community, how can we make sure this discussion reflects that unity in the community and not be any sort of divisive topic? I think we don't want to shy away from the fact that, yes, a year ago there was a bond proposal that was not approved by the community, and it was not approved by a fairly large margin, right? So we have learning to do from that. And as we do that learning, we want to make sure whatever comes next really does bring people together and not tear people apart. So as we do that, just some broad questions here. And what I don't want these questions to do, I don't want to get too specific into funding sources and the solutions and all that, but we would really like to hear from you. We said this would be a two-way conversation, but how does this community, how does the school community create the same energy around facilities projects and future planning to kind of draw out some of that unity that we've seen and felt in this community in the past? What could we do, what could the community do as a part of this to rally around each other in this scenario? So I'll open the floor to you. What thoughts are coming to mind as we talk about that? Just broad ideas. Yeah.
What comes to my mind is piggybacking what you said. This is not the community it was 60 years ago, financially. And I think part of the bond failure was sort of a blind eye to the economics of what this community is about.
So it felt like the proposal didn't reflect the
Yes.
agreement. Okay, that's helpful. Yeah.
I think something that we could use to rally the community around schools would be just putting a face to what we want to do, right? So like, these are our kids, and everybody in the community knows, like, there's Lily, she's riding down the road. There's Claire, she's going to the soccer field again. I think we can really, and I know there's like some fine lines that you don't want to cross and such, but like, these are actual kids that are actually growing up, and it's not just some like abstract thing, right? Like, oh, the schools, like it's just some big black box. Like, these are actual places where, and people know all of our kids. So how do we make it more personal, I guess, than just.
That's really good insight. Yeah, I think that's a great point here, because if you are proposing to see dollars amount, and you think about that as an entity versus student impact and what's actually making a difference in schools, that's a different angle, right?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? What would help this community rally together? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I will say we live in a world of influencers, and so part of that is having the influencers who are making those faces known. And that means having a broad scope of how it's communicated, not just the normal through the Midland Daily News or through the newsletter or through the internet. There are people in this community who are influencers.
Right.
So
Right.
using
Everyone
that,
is to some extent, right?
Yes,
Yep.
using that.
Yep.
Definitely.
Yep. Yeah, go ahead.
I'd be curious, you talked about the steering committee and picking them from a broad spectrum.
Yep.
And when I read through the names, I'm curious how you've encouraged them to be the influencers and actually talk about,
Yeah.
or are they actually involved?
Great
So
question.
when I'm reading through the list and had several other people at different elementaries read through the list, they aren't active people at any of the elementary schools.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to
Yeah.
influence the group of communities, in elementary in particular, you spend the majority of your time in. So if you have multiple kids,
Yeah.
they're K through 5, and you're doing that times multiple kids, versus middle school's a smaller chunk,
Yeah.
So I was curious to see how you're during that steering committee, if they really are this wide spectrum, where are their influencing circles? What are they
Great
doing?
question. I love that question. Tanvir, can I put you on the spot? Is that okay? If I pitch that question to you, go ahead. So Tanvir is part of the steering team, and he's here today representing them. Where have conversations led the steering team in the I would say, well, we haven't talked about influencing as much as we talked about being an ambassador and a link. But do you remember what we talked about that first session with the mapping? Can you walk through that a little bit?
Maybe it's people work.
What's that?
The mapping page.
Yeah,
people work, like
yeah.
the homework there.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about it as a steering team. We had everyone make a little map of who they're connected to. And it was really interesting because I think in a group of 25 people, we had over 160 different community groups, both formal and informal, but represented in that room. And so every session, we've talked a little bit about, okay, leaving the session, what do you do then to bring either a piece of information you've heard from the session or bring a question from the session to your circles. So I would encourage you, as you look through that list, that group has agreed to be public and a link to everyone to reach out to them and say, you know, I haven't heard from you, we would love to hear from you.
Yeah. And same when you guys go to it would be nice to say to them, like, have you attended a meeting, you know, or
Yep.
did you bring it up
Yep.
on the council that
Yep.
you're on or
Yep.
the board meeting that you're on?
Yep.
Have you done that? Yeah, I don't know, you know what I mean? Because I saw
Like
your
a
list,
follow
it
back.
told,
Yeah.
you put it on us to reach out to them.
We do talk about it. I'd say we could probably use some more accountability on the back end. So
Yeah.
I'll ask them about it tonight. Who here received an invite from anyone on the steering team to be here? Did anyone receive an invite? Oh, steering team. Okay, they were directed to send out a graphic and an invite to all their connections. So we will follow up with them tonight on that. Yeah. Okay. Well, great. I appreciate that question. Is there anyone else want to speak to what could create the same energy, the same community unity around a plan?
I just want to expand on what's already been said with the communication. We talk about influencers and we were talking about the people that are in the elementary school. But there's also a very, I'm sure you've considered it, but a very broad base of people that are older. Either they don't get the paper, they're not on social media. That's me. They don't have kids in the school. They're older, they
Yep.
may not be connected, they may not see the relevance or the importance, so that's just something.
Yeah, explore some other avenues to reach out. I appreciate that. Yeah. Okay. Well, in the interest of time, I want to keep us moving forward, but if you have any thoughts on that, please don't hesitate to hold them and share them with us later as well. So we just talked a lot about this team. Again, just a reminder, their directive is to be both this representative group, but and also come up with a recommendation together for the Board of Education. In doing that, we've walked through a lot of different scenarios and contexts. We've talked about financial info, facilities information, district history, that kind of thing. What the future hopes for district education are. One of the things we've talked to them about, and we'll be speaking to them about tonight, is just a look at how school facilities are funded across the state. I think sometimes, obviously, community members, you live in one community, you hear about that one community, right? Just so for their context and then for all of your context as well. So the state funding system for schools is really interesting in that the state does not provide much funding at all. In fact, you could say no funding for facilities in their per pupil allowance. That is about $10,000 per student per year that goes to all public schools in Michigan. So that, and about 85% of what goes towards all that is used for programs and teacher salaries, and then there's all these other things school districts must provide. So there's very little margin there for capital improvements. The state knows that and has thus set up a system where school districts can ask their community to fund significant facilities improvements. In fact, it's not just an option that they can do it is rather the only option. They must do that. So that's through sinking funds and through bond proposals. So what we're showing here are the millages in neighboring communities that fund those facilities, either through sinking funds or bond proposals. One thing we just want to point out, so Midland is currently at 2.5 mils. Again, we work across the state, so it's interesting to see that. That is rather low. Your community is investing rather little in the school facilities as it sits today. And even if you look at your neighbors, Meridian's at 7 mils, Bullock Creek's at 7 mils, Hemlock's at 4.9. You can kind of see just how it's stacking up a little bit in terms of the investment the community is putting in on that level. And then on the right here, you can just see the comparison in student count as well. So you want to take this picture?
And so like that slide back there was Midland County in general. Those are your closest neighbors that you can drive down the street and you can see the improvements that Hemlock is making to their facilities and the improvements to the educational experience at those schools on that campus. Why? Because the community invested through bonds and sinking funds in that district to allow for those facility improvements to happen. So if we start looking at a bigger scale across the state, everything in green, those are kind of your athletic comparisons. Those are who we're competing with for athletics. We can look to Saginaw is 9 mils towards facility improvements. Davison is 5. Grand Blanc is up to 6.3. But also look at the number of students that those districts are serving. The closest comparison to what Midland is serving is Grand Blanc at 7,200, and Midland still has 7,400 students. But Grand Blanc's community has rallied together enough to support those facilities with a much higher investment into those facilities as a whole. The district has the elite comparison group for curriculum. That's what we strive to be from a curriculum and testing standpoint and compare ourselves against. We can look at those schools as well, and those school districts, most of which are less students throughout the entire district, but vastly increase, a large increase over the total millage towards facilities. So like Forest Hills is 6, Okemos and Byron Center almost 8 mils of investment from the community into those facilities within that district. And so what is a mill? What does that equate to? How does that relate to me as an average person? I see a question first, so I'll pause.
Yeah, I'm just curious, if you're back on the mills, has Midland recently had a request for a millage increase for the schools that was rejected?
That would have been last minute.
That was the bond, right?
That was
Not a
the bond.
millage, right? Or-
Well, the millage pays for the bond. Like the millage increase is so many millions of dollars that equate to the total bond program.
Yeah. And then the sinking fund is different, right?
It's a different funding mechanism, all which can relate to the same millage rate. So 7 mills can be levied from the community. 4 of it can be for bond, 3 of it can be for sinking fund, or any combination thereof, but the total millage rate is the sum to get to that point.
Has there been a request for a sinking fund increase or anything that was rejected, or just the bond?
We don't currently have.
There's no sinking fund.
Yeah, so that's part of what we're exploring too. Is last time it was a bond, so what does it look like this time? Is it a combination? Is it just a sinking fund? Is it just a bond again? Yeah.
I was noticing the ones that are in the county that are at 7 mills.
Yes.
One of that, in terms of bond funding, the reason if they take state-funded bonds, the minimum mills they can take is 7, but their interest rate's almost half of ours. So like on the last bond, if we were at 7 mills and we had taken half the interest, it would have saved $100 million out of the taxpayers' pockets. So that's kind of, and plus they have very low tax bases. So even with those bonds, they only generate about $300,000 or $400,000 a year. So their mills are higher, but that's why when comparing millages, I have trouble because the amount of money they're generating based on those mills is very different from one community to the next based on the tax base.
Yeah, I appreciate that point. I think what we don't want to communicate here is that it's all apples to apples, just rather that for the taxpayers, though, that a mill means a mill across the state, right? So it's just kind of showing, it's not abnormal to be having this conversation for school districts because this is the funding system in which they've been placed.
So what does a mill mean? What does that mean for like an average homeowner? So average homeowner, in this region, say $240,000. Keep it very simple. Average tax value then is usually about half of that, so $120,000. So a mill, the easiest way I've ever learned to describe it is take the trailing zeros after your comma. That is 1 mill for you as a resident. So in this example, trailing zeros out, that means 1 year's mill is $120. So that's the equation to get to 1 mill. That's how you can generate 1 mill from an average homeowner. $10 a month or 33 cents a day is the equivalent of 1 mill for an average homeowner. So as a community, that 33 cents a day from 1 mill can have a huge impact for 7,400 students in this community. So it's a a smaller investment from all of us collectively together to make that huge impact for the broader community. And pulling together some of this stuff is like, well, what does that mean for me on an everyday basis? Some people relate it to, well, if you stop going to Starbucks every single week, that'll pay for stuff. Well, not everybody goes to Starbucks every single week. But what do a lot of people do? We have coffee, we have soup, we have candy. A lot of people like a Coke. All of these things that are on here are $1.50, to put that into perspective, from 33 cents. That we always have no problem going to Taco Bell and getting a taco at Taco Bell. Not even a Taco Supreme is greater than $1.50 now. All of these, just to put that into perspective, those daily $1.50 consumables, yes, it's more than just one meal that we're showing on the screen here, but $1.50 consumables that we don't care about from a day to day, think of the impact that can have on the entire community around us.
So in the process of, we talked about the guiding values that were created by the steering committee. We started to really dive into understanding enrollment projections, building utilization, understanding crowding, understanding programmatic needs from an educational standpoint to enhance student experiences at each of the buildings. So we started exploring ideas, and these are just ideas we have been thinking about. What combination of the ideas are going to play out is something the steering committee is working on to figure out what is the best solution forward that align with the guiding values. But we wanted to share with you what some of these ideas were that we were exploring. For example, Carpenter is an older 100-plus-year-old building. Should we be investing dollars into the Carpenter building from a facility standpoint, or should we leave Carpenter alone, just do the touch-ups it needs? Or should we take those pre-K kids and reimagine where they are placed in the school district within existing facilities? So we are looking at all different, I guess, for lack of better terms, permutations and combinations on how to maximize the return on investment with the existing facilities that are already at the district. So could Carpenter remain a pre-K building? Or could Carpenter, or the students in the program that is housed in Carpenter, become an opportunity for CTE programming at a high school where you build in early childhood education, a teaching degree, right? Like, there are many ways to look at it, and many school districts are reimagining that from a holistic standpoint of experiences for students.
Sorry, what is CTE?
CTE is continuing technical education. So it is just skills development beyond the standard classroom, curriculum that you are doing. So,
And just a quick note on context too. So a lot of this, we talked about last time in our last meeting, which we would again encourage you to go to the website to see all this. But we went through what the facilities assessment revealed in terms of the infrastructural needs of these facilities. So granted, that is our basis. Well, here these aren't just ideas for how we can mix up the district. This is saying we need to do something about the now 100-year-old Carpenter building. What are we going to do? Or do we address it in its current form? Or as we go to address it, does it make more sense, and is it more fiscally responsible to rethink the programming of that building? Is it there even, or does it go somewhere else? So just so you're aware, there's a lot of factors that kind of pour into where these scenarios are coming from.
thank you for that, having that clarification. Similarly, looking at the elementary schools. Many of the elementary schools have an issue with overcrowding. There are too many kids, not enough space to really have the optimal experience for our children and for teaching and learning. So could our elementary schools become a K-4 building? And if that would happen, that what happens to 5th grade becomes one of the ideas we started exploring. Or should the elementary schools remain at K-5? And if they remained at K-5, what would additional options look like? Then going into the middle school, we started to explore if fifth grade were to move out of the elementary schools, could Jefferson become that fifth, sixth grade hub? And if that became a thing, could Northeast Middle School, which we shared with you in our previous session on, the needs Northeast Middle School has are probably the highest among all the buildings in the district. So if we were going to rebuild Northeast, would we rebuild it as a seventh grade building? Or do we just rebuild Northeast status quo as it sits right now? So these are all ideas we have been exploring. And at the end of the day, if Jefferson and Northeast were to continue to remain status quo 6th grade buildings, what would that really mean and look like for the district? Then moving into high school, we started to then explore, if you look at the guiding values, going back to the career technical education and making sure all students are supported to set them up for success in the future, how would we start looking at the two high school facilities that we have? Does Dow High and Midland High remain 9-12, or does Midland High become a 10th to 12th grade hub? And at that point, do we create like a new campus for 9th grade students and provide some enhanced CTE opportunities for students? So we looked at some of those different options, but as you start thinking about moving grade levels from one building to the next building to the next building, it creates a sort of domino effect that you have to look at it holistically, not just in terms of ensuring your building utilization is at an optimal number for student experiences, and I'll keep mentioning student experience at the core, because any conversation about facilities cannot happen without thinking about our kids who are in those buildings. So it's very important to think about it in context of, so if I need to move a whole grade level out of two buildings into a new building, how am I going to accommodate all these additional students there? Now I have to start thinking about possibly an addition going in that building. Well, is that addition really a viable solution from a cost effectiveness standpoint? So this is how the domino effect of conversations happen, and this is something our steering committee is really leaning hard into to ensure that, again, those guiding values show up in the solutions that they put forth, in our conversations with the district or with the board.
Yeah, and I think, as those solutions come up, again, it's a question of some sort of investment is needed here. Something needs to be done. There are significant needs to address in these buildings, especially when you look at when these buildings were built, right? However, and when we do that, then does it actually, if significant investment is needed no matter what, then does it make sense to start reimagining some of this flow? So that's how we got here. And again, this is a mix of some different scenarios. We just wanted to give you nothing is decided yet. These are just the avenues we're exploring. There has been a lot of thought and work behind the scenes in terms of what is actually viable. These aren't just brainstorms. These are really truly vetted with numbers and all that, etc. So as we look at this, I think we want to pitch the question back to you, a little bit open-ended here, but what ideas of what Anita just shared about different flows, different ideas for the different levels, what resonates and what doesn't resonate so much? Yeah.
Is one thing I've noticed about my hometown is one of these models of having smaller, like two grades together, splitting out middle school framework like that. When there's fluctuations in the grade level across the years, so if you have a large group of seventh graders and then move into a different building, it has caused some hiccups in their district with just the change in the sizes of the classes year over year. So that's something I've seen from them. I wonder how that, I think
Let me piggyback on what she just said, and that is, you've used the term "our students" multiple times. It's a matter of designing this for our students, in district students, and not building something that's got a large buffer in it so we can suck in out of district kids and get extra money. We want to live within our means for our people. We don't want to have to put in all this facility money or theoretical more stuff coming
Yes.
in, maybe.
So actually that's a good point, Joe, because I wanted to just go back to the guiding values. So I just mentioned we work with districts across the state. These are truly bespoke to what you all have weighed in on, the steering team has weighed in on. There are other districts across the state that in their guiding values, in their priorities for anything they do, they say attract students. That has not been the directive of the steering team. So just so you know, none of these scenarios are coming out of a hypothetical, if we do this, more people will come to fill that space. This is really looking at what we have and making sure that for our students in the future, they're in environments that make sense for them.
So you're not going down the building and they will come.
That has not been brought up in the steering team, no. Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of creativity finally in looking at all the options. I did not feel that last year and the year before. I kind of feel like you've read my mind as a person who's worked with kids and substitute taught now for several years and been part of their choirs. I see all these options and I feel better about what you're looking at because I come from a standpoint of fifth graders shouldn't be in elementary school. That's just one of my things that I firmly believe, and I firmly believe in CTE and having ninth graders and the rest of them being able to have these little ones as a part of that's really, I think, a wonderful nod to what our future looks like and what we give our kids. So I'm glad that all these are being put on the table and looked at.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, go for it.
The things that pop out first to me is I love pre-K staying separate, and the idea is not to move it back into the elementary schools. Again, it goes to that age gap. Having fifth grade and kindergarten's already huge. Adding 3 and 4-year-olds back in, and I know one point there were 4-year-olds in, and with all the security and the lock, like I would never want to put any of my 3 daughters as a preschooler in a building with fifth graders, probably not even with 4th graders. So I really like pre-K staying separate, or in a wing somewhere else. Like one of the elementaries became, because you can't use pre-primary. And I don't think I'm the only parent who feels that way. I want my young kid experiencing what my elementary kids have experienced in the current settings. Moving to the elementary, like I also don't disagree. I like seeing some of the 7, 8, 5, 6. It does create more of a transition and logistic thing when you have multiple kids and now you're talking, I could be in 4 schools at the same time, you know what I mean? Because you have a lot more buildings, but I think developmentally you're hitting on a lot more stages. So keeping our 6th graders young, because they're with 5th graders, when you have 6 through 8, yeah, it's a big spread of developmental things. I went to my lower grades in Colorado and I was at kind of the 7, 8, 9 building, like kind of a similar thing. And I remember really liking it. It was all 2 grades, our pods, and people were, we weren't competing with kids a few years older than you in space and maturity and all of that. So, and then curious if the steering committee has also looked at when we're talking about our students and sizes with some of the new schools coming to the area and what that will do to our numbers. And I mean, no one has a magic ball, how much that will help the population or what's going to happen, but I think that's kind of unique as we see 2 elementary school kind of pod things start out in the area and what happens.
Yeah. Well, by the way, if anyone finds a magic ball, the steering team would really value that addition to the mix. So, yeah. Anything else?
No.
Okay. No, thank you. And Mandy was writing this all down so we can synthesize it and share it with the steering team tonight. So thank you. Yeah, Suzanne.
So when I look at what jumps to my mind is yes, a lot of possibilities and implementing and whatnot, but there's a $549 product that needs, whatever happens, that needs to be minimized to the lowest possible problem, so that maybe we have a little bit of luxury to
So let me just give an example of how this is a little bit doing both, right? So if we were to say, okay, Northeast in its current state is by far it has the most needs in the district, right? So what are we going to do with that building? The reason a lot of these ideas have come up because it said, well, what if instead of building an entire new building at Northeast, or even trying to figure out some piecemeal solution that would work in its current state, what if that building wasn't necessary? What if Jefferson became all of 5-6 for the whole district? What if Dow, as a high school currently, was then used for all of District 7-8? So that's kind of the thinking we're doing, is that then you're eliminating the need to necessarily do what had been brought up before of a brand new building. Now, no one has finalized exactly what yet, but that's just trying to give an example of how some of these ideas are flowing together in one.
Yeah, just that story has to go with the solution.
Absolutely.
And then
Yeah.
what's the bare minimum? And then the product.
Appreciate that. Yes, I hand.
I just, if this, overpopulation of buildings, and if you spread it out a little bit, does that create a staffing issue? And then where does that solution happen? Like with
Yeah.
that's state funding, right? Teachers by the state, so then, how does that, I don't know.
So I would say the way that we look at this is, and I'll cut you away too, Stephen, but it's on teaching stations. So that is the state's fancy words for basically a classroom where a teacher is teaching students. So we have gone through this based on teaching station counts. It hasn't been, none of this is inventing new teaching stations that need to be hypothetically filled necessarily. It's all the current teaching stations and figuring out where best they fit in different buildings. So staffing, I don't think we've identified a major.
We don't have a solution yet
Yeah.
in place, right? Or identified an idea that resonates yet, right? Like we are still in the process of exploration of what these permutations and combinations can look like. And as we start getting to a point where we have synthesized a couple of options, then the second layer would be to ensure all teaching stations, and as Brady pointed out, the Treasury Department identifies all classrooms as a teaching station. So we are using some of those semantics to analyze the existing conditions within each of the building, and if we were to take a grade level and move it to another building, the teaching stations needed for district-wide 6th graders, what would that number be? What the number is currently, what the number would be in 5 years, is what we're working towards when we are exploring these scenarios. If that helps answer your question.
You did have redistricting lines about as an option too. Is that being looked at?
In terms of like which neighborhoods are going to which building?
Yeah.
Not at the moment.
Not yet.
Not at the moment. And like I said, the steering committee is leading these conversations, so that has not been brought up quite yet. But should that be an exploration that we have to go through before?
So this did come up actually last night at the meeting a little bit in terms of, okay, well, if everyone is at, if all 5th and 6th graders are at Jefferson, what does the driving transition look like for someone from across the district to now be at Jefferson? This is split between the two middle schools too. So yeah.
I know this is probably a very small part of the issue, but would that increase busing then? Are we including?
And that's something
That
we're
came up
exploring right now
yesterday
too,
as
based
well
on the
in the
conversations
community
yesterday.
engagement session. We have not gotten to that point.
Also, not a small thing, big thing.
Yes,
So I
big,
appreciate you
big,
bringing that up.
big thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
The pre-K that's listed for Carpenter, I know in MPS enrollment online on the state website, there's generally 50 to 60 kindergartners counted as enrollment that are at the pre-primary, so the early 5s. So they actually count as kindergartners, but they're not in the elementary buildings. Also this year I noticed that our enrollment dropped by 142, and 70 of those were in kindergarten. Only 8 of them were at the pre-primary center. So that, and when you talk about the ability to forecast where we're going, it's like if there's that drop in the beginning, that's obviously going to trickle through potentially for subsequent years. So, but I don't, it always says pre-K, but those are actually kindergartners at the
that clarification.
Are young fives really considered kindergartners?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
okay.
yes.
I just wanna, just to clarify, because there is understanding about, you know, who these kids are, what their ages are. Okay.
Yes. I saw your hand back here.
Last year I was reading, I guess it was article in the daily news about the enrollments and how they have, there was a heat and things that started falling. And looking at future birth rates in US, etc., things are not going to be, enrollments probably are going to keep either very steady or keep going down. How's that going to reflect? So there are two fundamental realities, the enrollments and secondly the tight economy. I mean, those things you just cannot do anything about it. I mean, you can probably feed all that to a good AI system and come up with something for you, the best way to do it. So yeah, there are a lot of good things there, but I think that can be done by some good AI system. But what cannot be done is where the money is going to come from and enrollment.
Correct.
If you don't have enough enrollment, all that is
Correct.
the building has a joke. You build, they'll come.
So what we've been, all of these scenarios and how we're looking at building utilization and teaching stations is using the district's 5-year projection, which is developed by a third party, very smart data people that look at that 5-year enrollment. And that's what we're using as a benchmark for that, looking at the counts, for the counts that are done by the state. That company and those companies will use that to project where do they see 5 years down the road from now, and that's what we're using.
The 7,400 number, what do they say about that? Is that going to go up?
I believe the total in the 5-year projection, maybe a slight increase in that number, but it maintains a pretty stable level. There's some increases and fluctuations, just like we talked about, of they look at countywide statistics, all of that to develop, when could there be that bubble, right? Like you had talked about, and using that to forecast year over year to get to that 5-year point. I believe it stayed. There's consistency with the small increase in that based on the last count that was done.
Yeah, I'll reiterate. None of this money is being done for any sort of imaginary build bigger in the future to fill. That is not a driving factor in this. In fact, someone told me last night, waited after the session and told me, the facilities are the #1 reason my wife and I have Zillow alerts on our phone, because he wants to see facilities improve, otherwise he's interested in leaving the community. So it's a lot more on making sure that this community is set up for its future, not how can it be the prettiest thing to pull people in.
So are we only doing forecasting up to 5 years, that's it?
That's
Is that my
yeah.
understanding?
It's a 5-year projection, it's the furthest they'll project out.
Okay, so again, we said this is a back and forth here. So we would love for you all, I know this is a little tricky here, we're in this theater setting, but we'd love, let's go 4 small groups. If we can just move in groups of 4 or 5 together here. We would love for you to choose 2 of these questions and to discuss them in a small group format. And we'll do a little report out at the end. But basically we want you to hear from each other and to share your ideas with each other and kind of see different perspectives, where we're coming from and where we can find common ground. So the 4 questions we invite you to choose from here are, what does success look like for our schools and community, just broadly? What can the community come around? What types of solutions that you've heard presented today or that are on your minds, what types of solutions would you rally behind? What's the legacy? I think this just goes to what we were just talking about. What's the legacy that we want to leave for future students and families here in Midland? And if we do nothing, then what does this district look like in 10 to 20 years? Okay? So choose 2 of these, discuss for about 5 to 6 minutes in small groups, and we will come back. All right, everybody, I need your attention back up front, please. I want to thank you for such great discussions. I got to hear a little bit of what you all were talking about. Extremely valuable. I know it's hard to stop talking about it sometimes. Exciting stuff. Yeah, so thank you so much. I think what we'd like to do real quick in our last minute here is just hear from, if you just have one representative speak to the group, name one question you talked about and a quick summary of where your group got to in that discussion. So I'll start with this group in the corner here.
Okay. We discussed two questions. The first one was, if we do nothing, what will this district look like in 10 to 20 years? I think we talked about the schools will continue, or maybe even more so being disproportionate in numbers with the increase of population in different areas of Midland County. The buildings probably will have worse utilization of what they currently have, and then obviously facility decline as the buildings continue to age, and can we keep up with aging facilities, aging boilers, things like that. So we discussed that briefly, and then also what solutions might you rally behind, because we have kind of a cross section of people here, and so just asking what some people would rally behind the idea of one high school and what that might look like as things change.
Really?
Yes. That's what was brought up in our group.
Well, some did and some didn't.
So,
But I think we talked about how creative solutions could make me be, I wasn't about anti, but I think something that was creative, like I love all these different creative solutions, would make me convinced. I mean, my thing was, that's too big of a school for a ninth grader to be in. But if you had ninth grade out of there, and if it was just 10th, 11th, 12th, I might be convinced.
And I think we talked about the pooling of resources, if you will,
Yeah.
right? Like not busing back because you chose a different foreign language, or even like a 5-6 for the middle school splits, like the Northeast not offering Spanish for 6th grade because not enough kids signed up. So you have to go to Jefferson if you really wanted 6th grade. Like that shouldn't have to be a choice based on what school you're zoned to. So if they're together, then everyone has equal opportunity without having to get bused between buildings. So it's kind of
Thank you guys, appreciate that. How about this middle group here?
I can go. So what does success look like for the school and community? Something that we really talked about was making sure that we're competitive with our same size districts and not kind of getting lost on the wayside, and making sure that our community, because we're not Grand Rapids, a Detroit, Troy, we don't have those same features in our community, but we do have a great community, and I think one of the really great things we have right now is our schools and how we compare, and to kind of keep up with them and stay on that same trajectory.
So you're saying treat the schools as an asset?
Oh, it's for
To
sure.
invest in.
Yeah, we're in real estate, so we see it all the time.
Yeah.
The conversations with new people coming in and new young families, and probably number one question, what school is best for my kids? And right now, we can very confidently say, you're not gonna go wrong anywhere, but would that change? Could that change? Could that be, oh my gosh, no, this is great, you're never gonna find anything better? Or, could that conversation change to, well, you don't really wanna be in Northeast, because, the buildings fall apart. So that whole conversation.
Appreciate that, thank you. How about this group, those over here?
Well, just in full transparency, like I was with my group, I am on the steering committee. My name is Amy Sandborn. Love to talk to any of you that are here and have things that you would want to share after the meeting that I can take forward to our meeting tonight or future meetings. We spent a little bit of time of kind of revisiting the past, which was good. The one question that we did talk about is if we did nothing. The biggest thing we touched on was at least 2 of our schools wouldn't be serviceable or usable if we do nothing, or showing up on the news, Dan reporting on the news that a building caved in, or students were injured because of building failure, something like that. So I get that's a bit dramatic, but just to drive home the point of, from an infrastructure perspective, there's at least 2 buildings we know of that aren't going to be serviceable or usable in the near future. That's really the only question that we got to. Just something else I wanted to share that
I think would be a good one for the steering committee too is just really thinking about how do we rally and how do we move forward, and what does that look like? Meaning there's still a lot of you can feel the pent up frustration around what was done 9 years ago and decisions that were made in the past. How do we move forward from that for our kids and our community to continue, as they were just saying, to really be that beacon that we want to be, where we want people to stay and live and grow and do all the things that we love about Midland. That's a little bit of my...
And just a point of clarification, I totally agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
We have no reason to believe the students are currently unsafe. But
Oh, yeah,
that's a future projection, right?
Yeah.
But the building
Yes,
the buildings need help. Okay, but
Yes.
yes, yeah.
Thank you for saying
Yeah.
that.
No worries. Was there one more group back here? Is that
Well, we took the one, we only got to one question, what types of solutions might you value behind? 2 main points were got to be cost effective and have to be good for the kids. Those 2 primary things. They don't have to be fancy buildings. They don't have to be, everything for everybody kind of building. And next 5 years, 10 years are going to see major changes in the computer systems for I'm giving an example. I used to work for Dow. There is no library in Dow. Everything is on. They raised the whole building to be a full building full of books. There's nothing there. So I don't know what's going to happen in 5 years here. So we should really think totally fresh. I think we have not got to that. So, what do you guys have?
I think that covers it. I think the sticking point for me is going to be the cost effective piece and the solutions that we put forward need to be explained in simple enough terms and reaching the right people that are not here in these rooms and engaged in home. We need to prove that we've done our diligence in choosing the best, most cost effective thing to ask our community to do.
Okay, well, thank you all so much for being here. I recognize we're 5 minutes over, so I want to be respectful of your time. Some really interesting points were brought up on the person-to-person communication and why that's important. So I would really encourage you all, we have 2 more of these sessions. I should say 1 more session in 2 parts, just like each one has been done so far. So those are both on May 7th. The times on those are 11 a.m. and 6 p.m. Those will be communicated out at Northeast. So please invite people. Please share this. We will come with an update on the progress and some more feedback and some back and forth as well. But yeah, we're here to speak to anyone who's curious and wants to share some more ideas. But otherwise, please feel free to go. We thank you so much for your time this afternoon.